On the 26th of June, 2026, the machinery of a century-old empire was unplugged in a single afternoon. For decades, the soil of the Sahel bled gold while its people inherited the dust of engineered instability, caught within an invisible architecture designed to extract wealth and export dependency. But when Burkina Faso officially severed all diplomatic relations with France on national television, the final string of colonial alignment was cut. This was not a temporary recall of diplomats. It was a total institutional eviction. It forces us to confront a heavy reality, a question that echoes from the cotton fields of the American South to the red dirt of West Africa. If power changes hands, but not structure, has anything really changed? Do not look away. What you are about to witness is not merely a headline, it is a tectonic shift in global architecture. If you believe in the restoration of historical truth, take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the Upright Chronicles to stand with us on this journey. Mainstream networks will tell you this is a sudden crisis, a dangerous drift toward isolation. They want you to believe the Sahel is catching fire on its own, a landscape of perpetual chaos without a cause. But they willfully ignore the deep scars left by decades of economic manipulation, currency control, and covert intelligence networks embedded within the state. Today, we trace the precise, unyielding steps that led to this historic rupture in West Africa. We explore how Burkina Faso, alongside its brothers in the newly forged Sahel Alliance, is systematically dismantling the remaining tools of foreign influence. This is the story of how an unyielding leadership chose the raw, uncompromising truth of self-determination over the comfortable illusion of a colonial partnership. To understand the immense weight of what occurred in Ouagadougou, one must look closely at the precise sequence of events on that historic Friday, the 26th of June, 2026. It was an ordinary afternoon when the communications minister stepped before the state television cameras to deliver a message that would instantly reverberate across global capitals. The announcement was read with absolute calmness, yet every sentence carried the force of a tectonic shift. The government of Burkina Faso was officially informing the national and international community of its decision to sever diplomatic relations with France with immediate effect. This was not a standard diplomatic protest or a temporary recall of an envoy for consultations. This was a complete and final shutdown of the institutional machinery that had linked the two nations since the formal end of colonial rule. The official channels were closed, the accredited diplomats were stripped of their standing, and a definitive line was drawn in the soil of West Africa. What made this decision remarkable from a strategic standpoint was its profound commitment to legal legitimacy and clarity. The government took precise care to separate the actions of the French state from the historical and cultural ties shared by the ordinary citizens of both nations. The decree explicitly stated that this complete rupture concerned exclusively the institutional framework between the two governments at the diplomatic level. French nationals living within Burkina Faso were assured of their continued safety and protection under local law. This was not an outburst of chaotic anger. It was a cold, calculated assertion of sovereignty. By maintaining this strict distinction, the leadership demonstrated an advanced understanding of international protocol, refusing to allow mainstream media to frame the event as a xenophobic crisis. It was an act of pure institutional eviction, signaling to the world that Burkina Faso was fully prepared to manage its own house without external supervisors. At the absolute center of this historic confrontation stands a figure whose psychological profile and leadership style have redefined the political landscape of the continent. Captain Ibrahim Traoré does not govern from a place of detached luxury. Since assuming leadership, this young officer has consistently chosen a path of strict self-discipline and austerity that resonates deeply with the spirit of classic independence leaders. He famously refused to accept the lavish presidential salary, opting instead to maintain his modest income as an army captain. Visitors to the capital do not find him surrounded by gilded monuments or indulging in the traditional privileges of power. Instead, he is seen exclusively in his standard military camouflage uniform, wearing his distinct red beret and choosing to sleep on a simple cot in the military barracks alongside his soldiers. This is a leader who shares the daily realities, the hardships and the food of the men who defend the nation. This deliberate rejection of imperial luxury is more than a personal preference. It is a powerful psychological message to his people that the era of the compromised elite leader is over. This unyielding posture has made him an existential threat to those who wish to maintain the old order, resulting in an environment of constant and extreme danger. Over the brief span of just 3 years, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has survived more than 20 distinct assassination attempts and covert coup plots engineered against his administration. These were not random acts of violence, but highly coordinated efforts to eliminate a leader who refused to be bought or intimidated. The reason he is targeted so relentlessly is because his administration has dared to directly confront the shadow. In our narrative, the shadow represents the vast entrenched network of foreign intelligence operatives, proxy forces on the ground, and hidden financial influence that was intentionally left behind when colonial troops supposedly packed up and departed decades ago. This shadow was designed to ensure that even if an African nation possessed the formal symbols of independence, the true levers of control remained safely in the hands of the former master. By officially cutting ties with France, Burkina Faso has chosen to drag this shadow into the bright light of public accountability. The official accusation delivered by the government was uncompromising. Paris was openly accused of harboring neo-colonial ambitions and providing active support to the very subversive networks and insurgents currently tanfa the Sahel. For a sovereign state to place such a severe charge directly at the door of a major Western power on national television is an unprecedented act of defiance. It completely upends the traditional hierarchy where African nations were expected to accept external interference in submissive silence. The young captain and his people have decided that true dignity cannot exist alongside a compromised security architecture. But cutting the diplomatic line was only half the battle. The real shockwave came when the former colonial master realized that this time they could not patch up the cracks from within, prompting an immediate and furious response from European capitals. The immediate reaction from Paris arrived with expected coldness and strategic indignation. The official spokesman for the French Foreign Ministry stood before the international press and condemned the decision made in Ouagadougou as both hostile and entirely unfounded. In their official communication, Western authorities described the total severing of diplomatic ties as an illustration of a deeply worrying drift by the current leadership of Burkina Faso. They did not stop at mere verbal condemnation. The statement pointedly noted that necessary reciprocal measures were already under review. To an audience accustomed to the coded vocabulary of global diplomacy, this phrase was not a minor administrative footnote. It was a veiled threat, a clear warning that the former master intended to exact a heavy price for this public humiliation. Paris openly signaled that it would seek ways to strike back, monitoring local security while preparing an asymmetric counteroffensive through diplomatic, economic, or hidden channels. This aggressive posture from a European capital surprises no one who understands the painful archive of African history. For our older viewers, those who remember the mid-20th century and the bitter dawn of formal independence, these modern threats carry a chillingly familiar echo. We must travel back to the year 1958 to fully comprehend the psychological weight of this confrontation. In that pivotal year, General Charles de Gaulle offered the colonies a deeply flawed choice: join a restricted French community or take immediate absolute independence with zero external support. Only one nation had the profound courage to stand completely upright. Guinea, led by the visionary Ahmed Sékou Touré, looked the French general in the eye and delivered a historic declaration stating that his people preferred freedom in poverty to luxury in slavery. The response from Paris was swift, merciless, and organized to serve as a terrifying example to any other nation contemplating true autonomy. When the French administrators and technicians packed up to leave Guinea in 1958, they did not depart with dignity. Instead, they carried out a systematic campaign of total structural vandalism. They smashed light bulbs, ripped telephone wires out of city walls, burned medical supplies, poured concrete down sewage pipes, and set fire to vast administrative archives containing vital records of the new state. They even took the office furniture and destroyed agricultural machinery, determined to ensure that a self-determining black nation would collapse into immediate starvation and administrative chaos within weeks. This was the raw, unvarnished reality of imperial anger, a brutal message that if a colony dared to claim its own sovereignty, the empire would burn the house down on its way out. For nearly 7 decades, this historical trauma remained an unspoken warning across West Africa, a ghost whispering that defiance would always result in absolute economic ruin. This is where the profound contrast of 2026 reveals itself as a majestic pivot in the story of the continent. The modern threats of reciprocal measures issued by Paris this week are met not with fear, but with a calm collective resilience that represents a completely new era of African dignity. This is not 1958. Burkina Faso does not stand isolated, vulnerable, and alone against the weight of a European power. Today, the nation stands shoulder to shoulder with its brother states in the newly consolidated Confederation of the Sahel states. When Paris hints at retaliation, it faces a unified front of 3 sovereign territories, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, bound together by a solemn mutual defense pact, where an attack on one is recognized as an unequivocal attack on all. This is the living manifestation of the balance between accountability and impunity. For generations, the former colonial power operated with absolute impunity, changing governments and rewriting local laws at will. Today they face a generation of leaders who demand total accountability, turning the tables of history permanently. The emotional atmosphere across the streets of Ouagadougou and the wider region has shifted completely from the sorrow of the past into a powerful, dignified conflict. The people do not look at the empty French embassy with anxiety. They see it as a symbol of true liberation. They know the risks of economic sabotage and political destabilization are real, but their psychological conditioning has transformed. They understand that true independence is never gracefully gifted by an oppressor. It must be seized by the oppressed. The unyielding stance of Captain Ibrahim Traoré has shown them that the old threats have lost their power to paralyze the African imagination. The era of accepting lectures from capitals thousands of miles away is permanently finished. France vowed retaliation, but they forgot one crucial detail. The financial chains that once held the Sahel were already being melted down from within. The structural dismantling of foreign influence within the region goes far deeper than a single diplomatic document signed in a government office. To build a stable house, a nation must first clear its terrain of deeply rooted weeds. For decades, the administrative and social landscape of the Sahel was overrun by external entities masquerading as neutral humanitarian observers. Consider the dramatic decision made within the alliance just last year, when governments moved to suspend close to 3,000 local and foreign non-governmental organizations in a single stroke. 3,000. The state authorities openly accused these networks of a total lack of financial transparency, and in several documented instances, providing quiet logistical cover to armed insurgencies. This was an entire shadow layer of foreign-funded machinery operating under the beautiful banner of charity completely turned off. The alliance looked at this sprawling network and recognized that these organizations were not passive helpers, but active political instruments shaping the internal security of sovereign soil. Along with this cleanup came the complete rejection of external judicial weapons. By jointly walking away from the International Criminal Court, the nations declared it an instrument of selective justice that targeted Africans while granting absolute immunity to Western overreach. They chose instead to build their own domestic legal frameworks, reclaiming the gavel of their legal destiny. Yet the true battlefield of this struggle is found deep beneath the earth, inside the hidden financial architecture that has quietly drained the wealth of West Africa for generations. To comprehend the immense stakes of this moment, we must examine the restrictive mechanics of the colonial currency system, a monetary arrangement where local money is still structurally tied to European supervision and printed inside France itself. For over half a century, financial arrangements dating back to the 1960s forced sovereign African nations to deposit a massive percentage of their national foreign exchange reserves directly into an operational account managed by the foreign treasury. It was a brilliant predatory design where the hard-earned wealth generated by African labor was held in European vaults, giving external actors an effective veto over domestic monetary decisions. This was the ultimate expression of the chain. True political independence is an impossibility when a nation does not possess total authority over its own financial system. The ongoing structural rupture between Burkina Faso and France is fundamentally an execution of economic liberation, a systematic unraveling of this historical monetary trap that mainstream networks constantly label as a reckless mistake. To permanently break this extractive cycle, the leadership in Ouagadougou took direct control of its most vital mineral asset. Burkina Faso moved decisively to nationalize its gold mines, forcing foreign mining conglomerates to surrender substantial equity stakes back to the state. They did not stop at merely rewriting lopsided contracts. They constructed a state-owned gold refinery within their own borders. For the first time in history, the gold pulled from the rich earth of the Sahel is processed, purified, and stamped at home, rather than being shipped out as raw material to European markets. This ensures that the surplus value of the nation's natural resources remains within the domestic economy to fund public education, healthcare, and national security. It is a direct, uncompromising assault on the old colonial model where Africa was viewed merely as a raw mine for Western consumption. Piece by piece, the financial architecture that kept wealth flowing outward is being demolished in real time, giving the state the concrete resources it needs to protect its citizens. Let us take a moment here not to rush forward, but to give thanks. Write a comment below with a simple thank you to the unyielding spirit of sovereignty itself. Gratitude is not a mere formality. It is recognition. It is dignity expressed in words. When you add your voice of thanks in the comments section, you are not just engaging with a video. You are standing in absolute solidarity with the historic struggle for freedom and pride. Imagine hundreds of people from across the global African diaspora adding their thanks, transforming a simple comment section into a monument of collective memory. So before we continue deeper into this breakdown, take this brief pause to type your thank you and let your voice be counted in this shared journey of truth. This profound domestic transformation requires one vital condition above all else, and that condition is space. A government cannot build modern infrastructure or cultivate a thriving agricultural sector while fighting a continuous engineered war on its own territory every single day. Every hour spent repelling proxy warfare is an hour stolen from national development. Therefore, dismantling these foreign networks is not an ideological luxury. It is the absolute prerequisite for survival. The Sahel Alliance is clearing the distractions before the distractions clear them. They are asserting that peace is not something to be begged for at international conferences, but something to be enforced through absolute domestic authority. But as the alliance successfully closed the domestic megaphones and reclaimed their natural wealth, a sudden trap was being prepared thousands of miles away in the halls of European power. To truly understand the geopolitical shockwaves of this institutional divorce, we must retrace the dramatic 4-day countdown that triggered the final rupture. The spark was not ignited in the capital of Burkina Faso, but thousands of miles away in the administrative halls of Brussels. On the 17th and 18th of June 2026, the European Parliament convened a formal session to debate and pass a highly critical resolution concerning what they termed the ongoing repression of civic space and fundamental freedoms in Burkina Faso. During this debate, a prominent French politician stood before the assembly. His name was Christophe Gaumont. To an outsider, he appeared to be just another lawmaker delivering a routine lecture on governance. But inside West Africa, his presence carried a much heavier meaning. This individual was a former general in the French military, a man who had spent his entire career managing defense strategies and security structures across the Sahel. When a former colonial military commander stands inside a European parliament to dictate terms to a sovereign nation, it is not received as diplomacy. It is understood as a direct insult to national dignity. The response from Ouagadougou was swift and uncompromising. On the 22nd of June, the foreign minister of Burkina Faso officially summoned the head of the European Union delegation, Philippe Brochin. In a tense meeting that stripped away all standard diplomatic pleasantries, the state authorities informed the envoy that the European resolution was false accusatory and deeply rude. The leadership pointed out that a foreign politician had stood before the world presenting fabricated numbers about a country he had never even visited, revealing a persistent neo-colonial undertone. It was during this intense diplomatic confrontation that the ministry delivered a historical truth that Western media continuously attempts to ignore the current security crisis Tanfa, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso today is the direct consequence of the destruction of Libya by Western forces in 2011. The Sahel did not catch fire by accident. It was deliberately destabilized when an African nation was broken open from the outside, causing weapons and instability to flood southward across the desert. Now let us map this global awakening. Take a second right here to tell us where you are watching this video. Type the name of your city, your state, or your corner of the diaspora in the comment section below. The Upright Chronicles wants to express our deepest gratitude to everyone walking this path of historical truth with us, and we send each of you a heartfelt wish. May justice, strength, and light guide your steps wherever you stand on this earth. Let our comments become a map of global solidarity. The Western powers viewed their parliamentary resolution as a routine legal lecture, completely blind to the changing psychological reality of the continent. They expected the young leadership in the Sahel to sit quietly and accept the criticism. Instead, the alliance viewed this intervention as a hostile diplomatic provocation. When Paris realized that their traditional leverage no longer carried the power to intimidate, the confrontation reached a breaking point. Mainstream media networks quickly reported that France vows retaliation after its strategic architecture was exposed, but the political reality on the ground had already shifted beyond their control. The timeline reveals the absolute speed of this awakening. On the 22nd of June, the European envoy was summoned. Just 4 days later, on the 26th of June, the entire diplomatic relationship with France was terminated. The Western nations assumed they were dealing with isolated states that could be pressured individually, failing to realize they were facing a unified front that had already mapped out its path to absolute liberation, leaving international observers wondering how the remaining members of the alliance would respond to the looming storm. The path forward for the Confederation of the Sahel states is mapped out not in the quiet boardrooms of foreign capitals, but in the collective consciousness of a people determined to redefine their destiny. The historic rupture initiated by Burkina Faso is not a standalone event. It is the blueprint for a sweeping regional transformation. Mainstream geopolitical analysts predict immediate isolation, yet they completely fail to understand the profound psychological shifts occurring across West Africa. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are no longer operating as fragile, scattered territories susceptible to individual Western pressure. They have consolidated their survival into a single unyielding fist. The alliance is systematically building a multi-layered fortress of defense food security and industrial processing designed to ensure that the wealth extracted from African soil finally serves the children of that very soil. This is a long-term vision rooted in the absolute restoration of regional dignity. Look closely at the structural design of the Confederation. It is a model built upon absolute reciprocity. For decades, global governance structures treated African nations as permanent juniors, requiring them to submit their budgets for external approval and accept unilateral interference. The youth of the Sahel have completely rejected this unequal dynamic. They understand that a nation that relies on the charity of its former master for its basic security is not truly free. The path forward demands a complete restructuring of all international partnerships. The leaders of the alliance are establishing new economic corridors, diversifying their global alliances, and investing heavily in local manufacturing. They are showing the entire continent that it is entirely possible to step off the colonial treadmill. This is the ultimate manifestation of a new political paradigm. This is not reform. This is not rhetoric. This is accountability. The geopolitical momentum suggests that the diplomatic eviction witnessed in Ouagadougou is merely the opening chapter of a wider regional exit. The structural logic of the Sahel Alliance dictates that when one member advances, the others naturally align their positions to maintain a unified front. They walk out of the regional bloc together. They abandoned the biased international courts together. They suspended biased foreign media corporations together. Therefore, it is highly probable that before the year 2026 draws to a close, Mali and Niger will take the exact same definitive step, severing all institutional ties with Paris, to complete the total diplomatic decolonization of the region. The old architecture of control is crumbling because its foundational legitimacy has evaporated. The people of the Sahel are no longer asking for permission to be free. They are actively enforcing their sovereignty through concrete policy and absolute legal clarity. Before we close this crucial chapter and step into our final reflections, let us pause together. What you have just heard on the global stage is not simply a random episode of contemporary history. It is a profound reminder that sovereignty, dignity, and hope are still fully alive, waiting to be claimed by those brave enough to stand upright. If this message of historical truth and political awakening has moved your spirit, then subscribe to this channel right now. We do not ask for subscriptions for mere numbers or digital vanity, but to build a powerful, unyielding space where the voices of true independence are honored and where stories of raw cultural pride continue to be told without compromise. By subscribing to the Upright Chronicles, you are choosing to walk with us into the next unfolding chapter of global history. Hit the notification bell, become part of this collective awakening, and stand ready for the truths that mainstream networks refuse to broadcast. The diplomats are packing their bags, the majestic colonial embassies are darkening one by one, and the old masters are realizing that their threats of economic retaliation have lost their traditional power to paralyze. The transition into a multipolar world order is no longer a distant academic theory. It is a living reality playing out on the streets of West Africa. The youth are watching, the global diaspora is waking up, and the momentum of history has permanently shifted. The Sahel has chosen to step out from the long shadow of imperial oversight and walk into the bright, unpredictable light of total self-reliance. But as the old treaties are cast into the fire of transformation, the biggest question remains hidden inside the vault of tomorrow. The unraveling of corporate and imperial oversight in West Africa signals the dawn of a profound regional renaissance. For generations, external entities treated the African continent as an eternal archive of raw resources, a place where sovereignty was merely a diplomatic mask rather than a living reality. Today, that illusion has been completely shattered by a generation that demands total structural accountability. The decoupling of Burkina Faso France is an irreversible realignment of geopolitical power. It proves that when a people reclaim their historical narrative and their mineral wealth, the old tools of psychological and economic intimidation lose their traditional capacity to paralyze. Although Western media reports that France vows retaliation, the collective willpower of the Sahel Alliance remains entirely unshakable. The red soil of Ouagadougou, the crowded streets of Bamako, and the ancient crossroads of Niamey are no longer lines on a foreign map. They are the roaring epicenters of an authentic, self-determined future. We are witnessing a majestic transition from historical subjugation into absolute independence. The structural rupture of Burkina Faso France represents a deep reclamation of cultural legacy and political legitimacy. The era of accepting quiet exploitation under the comfortable guise of international cooperation is permanently finished. As we look toward this unfolding horizon, the questions we must carry into the comment section are heavy and essential for our collective understanding. Do you believe Mali and Niger will follow Burkina Faso's footsteps before this year ends? When the economic and diplomatic tools of foreign influence are completely gone, will the Sahel finally find the peaceful space it needs to build its future? Or will the old pressures simply assume a new form? The Upright Chronicles would like to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who has journeyed with us through this unfiltered historical exploration. Your presence, your insightful voices, and your unwavering commitment to historical truth are what keep these vital narratives alive when mainstream networks choose to look away. We send each of you our most heartfelt wishes. May absolute justice, enduring strength, and clear light guide your footsteps wherever you stand across the global diaspora. Thank you for your valuable time. Thank you for your unyielding pride, and until the next chapter unfolds, continue to stand upright.